Welcome to the Christian Romance Podcast, where we go behind the books with inspiring Christian romance authors, exploring faith, love, and the journey that brings the story to life. I'm your host, Kelly Jo Wilson, and today we're chatting with Leslie Gould. Leslie is a best-selling and award-winning author of 50 novels, including the Amish Memories and Plain Patterns series. With over 800,000 books sold, she's known for her rich storytelling and deep historical insight. Leslie holds degrees in history, communications, and creative writing and lives in Oregon with her husband, Peter. They have 4 grown children and 2 grandchildren. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode so you can hear more about our newest book giveaway. Now, here's my conversation with Leslie. Hi, Leslie. I am so excited to have you here on the Christian Romance Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. This is really lovely.
Oh, yes. I cannot wait to hear more about your personal story and how you got started writing. You've written now how many? 48, I want to say, books, or is it more now?
Yeah, it's 50. Yeah, this
50
is my
now. I knew it was more.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. What a thing to celebrate. I love it. Congratulations to you. It's wonderful. And you've written in different genres, which I can't wait to hear more about. So why don't you just let our listeners know a little more about you and how you got on this writing journey and how God kind of carried you through that and what kind of genres you are writing in now.
Okay, great. Well, I started writing in my late 20s, early 30s, and I started out with short stories. And then I realized I had a couple novels in me and I worked on those. But it took me 10 years from when I first started writing those short stories until I got my first book published. And my first book was a contemporary women's fiction. It was called Garden of Dreams, and it was about 2 best friends and their story around illness, and the story of their families and how they support each other. And then after that, I wrote a couple more contemporary fiction novels, women's fiction. And then I started writing Amish fiction. I first co-authored with Mindy Starnes-Clark, and our first book together won a Christie, and it was a #1 bestseller on both
Amazing.
the CVA and the ECPA. So then Mindy and I, we ended up writing 8 books together, and then I started writing Amish fiction on my own. By then I'd done a lot of research trips. I had a lot of contacts in the Amish community. My kids had all gone to a Mennonite preschool, and I visited that church some. And I have Anabaptists way back in my family tree. And a trip to Pennsylvania in 1987 with my husband and our firstborn took me to Amish country. My husband had not grown up, but had lived in Pennsylvania part of his growing up and lived in an adjacent county to Lancaster County. And he and his family used to visit Lancaster County all the time, and they loved it. And so when we took this trip around the United States, he said, we have to go to Lancaster County. And of course, I was fascinated, just about like everybody, by the Amish. And I started doing research on the Amish long before I ever started writing about them. So I really had this interest in it. And so then besides the Amish fiction, I've also done a series with Mindy on the Huguenots, and I've written probably around 20 cozy mysteries with guideposts. So just kind of a wide variety of things. And for a while, I was also teaching writing at a local university, at Warner Pacific University, and I loved that. But I stopped doing that a couple of years ago. It just was getting hard to really get my writing done, and teaching just really takes a lot of time. So I missed that, but I felt like it was time to just concentrate just essentially on the writing. So
That's wonderful. I love that you started with short stories. I think that they do not get enough spotlight because short stories, I feel like, and you tell me what you think, but I feel like it's so much harder to write in short form than it is a longer piece. Now, don't get me wrong, writing novels and writing long books is difficult, especially when you're world building and you have to have certain elements in there just to make sure that it's good. But don't you think, it's very difficult to write a cohesive story in like say 2,500 words. I feel like it's just a little
Mhm.
bit harder. Do you agree with that, or do you feel like it's just so different?
Right. Yeah, it's really an economy of words. I mean, to characterize your, really get your characters down, to get your plot down, all of that. And then you have to have a really strong emotional punch, that works within that setting and with those characters without, having 300 pages to build up to that emotional punch. And I went back to school and got my MFA in my 40s. So after I'd first been published, and then I went back and for my thesis, I wrote a series of connected short stories that I'd love
Oh.
to do more of that, and oftentimes they're called novels, just kind of depending on how they're marketed. But I really like that form too, and that's something I'd like to explore, sometime. I don't know in what genre, but yeah, I really love the stories that are told with interconnected short stories too.
Oh yeah, totally, totally.
Mhm.
And I feel like nowadays too, like short story can really be anywhere, like from, it can be up to 10,000
Yeah.
words or so. And then you
Hmm.
have novellas, that kind of thing. But yeah, so
Hmm.
when you say like the connected, you wrote like, was it all based in like the same town, or were they connected through certain characters, or what was the connection?
Yeah, so they were all connected through adoption, and it
Oh,
was a
okay.
set of characters within my hometown of Portland who either had been adopted or were somehow connected through adoption, and mostly through Vietnamese adoption. Our youngest, is adopted from Vietnam. So, and my
Oh,
second book, Beyond the Blue, takes the emotions of our experience. It's not our experience. It's, totally a novel, totally fictionalized, but, really takes the emotion. So that's always just been a topic, that I really care a lot about. And,
oh
just
yeah, that's wonderful.
have a lot of emotions around.
Absolutely. I love that you wrote about it too, because I feel like there would be so many emotions surrounding that. And you would have just such a good, firm foundation on what those characters are going through, because it's, scary, but then it's joy. And there's,
Mhm.
you're contemplating if it's going to go through, and just helping these beautiful, you said it was your daughter or son or
Yeah, daughter.
daughter.
Hmm.
Yes. Oh, just lovely. I love that you guys did that. My gosh. God
Yeah.
bless you. I love it.
Well, he really did bless us. Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely, absolutely. I was actually just talking to Nicole Deese about that, because
Oh,
she wrote
yeah.
about adoption too. She
Hmm.
adopted her daughter as well, and then she wrote about it in one of her books too. And
Hmm. I think
it's
I've
just
read that
so.
book.
Oh yeah, before I called you mine.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it's awesome. It
Mhm.
just, I love the whole sentiment behind it, and then that is so neat to connect your stories all together through that theme, like through that concept too. I just think that's amazing. And especially so your past. So yes, you were a teacher and everything, but I want to hear a little bit about how you majored in history and you're a museum curator. That is so neat. Tell me how you got into that.
Yeah, that was just really incredible. It was, a real gift from God. I just graduated from college and we moved down to Ashland, Oregon, which is just this beautiful town nestled right at the foot of the Siskiyou Mountains. And so way back it had a Chautauqua program.
Hmm.
And then that program morphed into the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is really a world renowned theater, program where people from all over come and they put on Shakespeare plays and all sorts of other plays. And at the time, they had a really good historical society in the county, and they had several museums, and there was a museum in Ashland. And I started volunteering there. And then the curator resigned. And as a 23-year-old, I was hired to be the curator of this museum. And, when I got a history degree, people were like, oh, you're never going to find a job, with a history degree. But I did. And I
You
double
did.
majored in communications. So it was like the perfect combination to be a museum curator. I knew how to do research and I figured out how to do exhibits, and, I did TV interviews and, just all sorts of things. And I ended up knowing about the history of these early pioneer families because of Ashland, I ended up knowing so much more about them than I even knew about my own family histories. And I was really interested, in my own family histories. But yeah, it was just really a dream job. It was, just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of fun, especially what a neat festival with this whole, like the Shakespearean festival. That sounds
Hmm.
amazing. I would love to go to something like that. Super fun.
Yeah, yeah, and I just had a lifelong interest in Shakespeare. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and after the older kids went to school, my mom would put on Shakespeare plays on the phonograph, those old record players, which you probably don't remember,
No, I
but
totally do.
okay. And she would do housework listening to Shakespeare plays. And so I
Aw.
just kind of grew up listening to Shakespeare, and I took Shakespeare in college, and then I went back to get my MFA, and I took a Shakespeare class just because I loved it so much. And I came up with the idea of doing a Amish series inspired by Shakespeare plays, which were great because they're both patriarchal societies. Although the Amish families, I know, that you'd say they're patriarchal, but the women really have a nice, strong voice, and you can tell there's a lot of mutual respect and a lot of collaboration going on and that sort of thing. But it worked great to use the Shakespeare plots for Amish stories, and that was my Courtships of Lancaster County series. So that interest in Shakespeare paid off, through lots of different projects I've worked on over the years. So.
Oh, absolutely. And isn't that so funny? Just co-creating with God, like nothing is ever wasted, right? He always uses our experiences for good, right? He can turn
Oh,
everything for good. Because
definitely.
how amazing is that? Especially, I love that you say your friends are like taunting you, like, you're never going to find a job with a history degree. And it's like a dream job for someone with a history
Right.
degree. That's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
Hmm.
amazing. And I love it. And I would imagine that did spark so many neat ideas for stories. That's what I was going to ask you next. If you got any
Yeah.
ideas from that.
Well, my first novel, Garden of Dreams, was set in Ashland, so that
Mm.
was really, that was just a payoff from all of that. But it was contemporary. So as far as historical, I mean, I know that I've used ideas from what I learned. And just like studying the history of a town over the decades and generations. Like, I've written about the Civil War, and a lot of people came out to Ashland right after the Civil War. But I've written about World War One, World War Two, the Vietnam War, and just having that in my head, how were people reacting during those periods of time on the home front? So I know what I learned about the people of Ashland. It's definitely made its way into my books in a more generic way so far. But I do have some ideas. I'd love to write write more historical fiction and set one in the Ashland area. So we'll see.
It sounds like such a beautiful town. I'm going to have to look it up and see. And
It
then did you
is.
say, so when you guys did your trek to Pennsylvania, which Lancaster County is very close to me, it's only about 4 hours or so
Okay.
away.
Mm-hmm.
A very good friend of mine lives there, and it has always been, certainly Amish. And then as a nurse, so I was a nurse before I became a medical
Oh,
writer. I
great.
took care of many. We had a lot of Amish families that would come down into the hospital, and the whole family was there with them. So it was,
Mm,
and as a nurse, you're not just caring for the patient, you're caring
yeah.
for their family too. So I
Mm-hmm.
I got a chance to talk with some of them, and just it just, I love the simplicity of the Amish lifestyle. It doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
it's just because they live simply and in certain ways doesn't mean that it's easy
Right.
at
Right.
all,
Right.
because they're
They,
very hardworking.
mm-hmm.
And but I love that they really put at the center, or it seems to, that they really put at the center family and God, and just living a simple life. And I feel like it's so refreshing. I feel like we need so much of that
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, because there's so much noise in our lives. I just was doing a Bible study this morning, and it was with a focus on how to be quiet, like our quietness with God, and how he says, be still and know I am God. And stillness isn't something that's like ingrained in us. So we're always working and racing around and doing a bunch of things. So when you came and whenever you did your trek, I got a little off track, but I was going to ask you, when you went to Lancaster, so were you guys doing like a cross country trip kind of thing? Like you were just traveling different states? What was that like?
Yeah, we were. So this was in 1987. So way back. I was 25. We had our first baby, and we had a Volkswagen bus that it was a camper van. So my husband had friends in New York, and by the time they got there, they just thought we were hippies from Oregon. But we really weren't. But we did have a Volkswagen bus. But we took a trip around the US, and we had like our traveler's checks, and we had a certain budget. This was so old school. But we didn't go as far as we wanted. We wanted to go up into Quebec. But our van kept breaking down, so we had to get our van prepared. So we had to cut out part of Canada. We did make it to Winnipeg, and then we came back down and we went to Pennsylvania. We went to New York. We went up to Maine, and then we only made it as far south as kind of the South Carolina, North Carolina border, because we had to cut out some. And then we headed west. So it was a 6-week trip, around the United States, which it was just so fun, and tiring. But
I'm sure.
fun.
I'm sure. And how old was your child at the time?
Yeah, he was 4 months when we started off, which, actually turned out to be a really good age to travel.
Yeah, he probably slept a lot.
Yeah, he slept a lot.
Yeah.
And, easy to sleep with in our little camper van. And yeah, so yeah, it was an amazing trip. Now, the only 2 states I haven't been to are Alaska and Mississippi. So, it was a great way to see a lot of the U.S. And we've traveled a lot since then. But I still need to pick up Alaska and Mississippi. But
That's amazing. I love that you guys did that so much, especially before like it's like more modernized. I feel like now you can like rent campers and things like that. You're doing it before people are even thinking about it. I love that, Leslie.
We would just find our next place to stay. We couldn't reserve anything online or, any of that. We had, some friends along the way that we stayed with, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. My husband's very adventuresome, and it was really him. Most of the big things we've done, he kind of comes up with the idea, and I go, oh yeah, that sounds great. So,
oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. My husband and I have talked about doing that too, going out west, because we haven't really been out west that much. Like the Ashland sounds beautiful. I would love to see it, especially even like going to the state parks. I just talked with Suzanne Woods Fisher. We were talking about the Grand Teton state park. Am I saying that right? Grand Tetons?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's
Grand Teton. No,
Teton.
Right.
Tetons.
Yeah.
Yes. She said it was like so amazing. It's just unbelievable. So I was like looking it up. We would love to do that. He's not real big on flying too. So I was like, we should do that. We should really take the boys and like rent a camper and just go. Yes.
Yeah,
totally.
definitely. Yeah, there are so many amazing places in our country. Yeah, really.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so like vast. Even like where I was telling you before we started recording, like how I live in the middle of the woods. You would never picture like a place like where we live, like when we first saw the house, it's so wonderful. It's just a different kind of peace whenever you're like in the midst of like nature and in the woods, you're just seeing these different things. And then even in the city, it's beautiful. I just would love to see different places like that. I feel like it's just important to make those memories. I love that you guys did that. And it gives you lots of ideas for stories.
Yes. And, just like a context for so many different locations too, right? Just for settings and where to have people from and, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just researching because in my second book I'm writing about, and like I want it to be, or I'm thinking it'll be somewhere in New York, like upstate New York, because it's mainly going to take place on a dairy farm. And I'm like, this is only a few hours away. I should probably go here. Just take a
Yeah.
drive because I don't really know much of New York State. New York State is huge. Everybody
Yeah, it
talks about New
really
York City.
is.
New York State is big. It has the Finger Lakes. It's like beautiful
Mhm.
areas over there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to take a trip now,
Yes.
Leslie.
Yes, because you always find things to incorporate in your story if you actually go to the place or if you've been
Yes,
there. Because they're just, I mean, we can do Google Earth, we can do all these things, but you don't feel the place in the same way as if you've stood there and, walked the streets and, just seen the buildings and talked with people who live there. That's
absolutely.
really
And
how we
how
get
fun.
setting.
Absolutely, 100%. And I
Hmm.
feel like people would appreciate so much if you are using like their setting or using their like, family business or something like that in your book. Have you ever done that? Have you ever like asked anybody or used any like small business or anything and have told people like, "Hey, I'm going to use you in my book."
Yeah. Okay, I'm thinking really hard. Nothing's coming to mind. Most of the times I fictionalize businesses. I just somewhere along the line, someone gave the advice. But if you ask permission for it, I think if you have a connection, with and I'm sure I have used, I know, well, no, I actually have because there's a creamery in Strasburg, Pennsylvania, right on the
Oh,
main corner. And my husband and I stayed, there's a hotel above the creamery, and you get at least when we stayed, you got your like morning breakfast down in the creamery. So I did. So I talked with the manager and I used the creamery and I've used the creamery since because I did talk with the manager. So yeah. So in those cases, yeah,
awesome.
yeah, definitely. But
It's such a fun thing, I feel like because and then it might be actually better now that you say it to fictionalize it a little bit, but it's neat to get that inspiration. And you're
yeah,
100% right. You got to go there and absolutely. Now, sometimes you can't go everywhere, but if it's
right.
close, it's nice to take a little trip.
Yeah. And with my last series, so I've been to Germany, and I've been to Frankfurt, Germany before, but I really intended to go back, but it was right at the beginning of the pandemic when I should
Hmm.
have been traveling, and we just couldn't go. So thankfully, I had pictures, and I just looked at a ton of videos, and did a lot of research. So yeah, you're right. There's sometimes when you just can't go, for all sorts of reasons.
Yes.
Not just pandemic, sometimes just budget. You have
Oh,
to
yeah,
budget your
exactly.
travel, your research money, and everything else. But yeah, I think if you can go, it's great, and if you can't, you can figure that out
You
too.
can figure it out. Yeah,
But
absolutely. Or talk to somebody who's been there. I will
yeah,
tell you, Frankfurt. Have you been there since? You said you
well,
were
I
there,
was there
but
a long time ago,
long time ago, and
so
then okay.
like in the 1990s. Uh, so right, so I'd been there, so I kind of had I had some ideas, so that helped.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure.
I
I
wanted to go
actually
back.
went that place, it's very interesting there. I went right outside of Frankfurt. I was able to go to there was a place called Mossbach that we went to. It was like a small town outside of Frankfurt. I would say maybe an hour or so. Um, sure, right after the 90s. It was I want to say it was
Oh,
2001 or 2002. And it was very much like it was around Christmas time. It was like in early December.
oh,
So it was very
nice.
much like the little villages that you would see
Oh,
like in like setting up for
with
Christmas
the Christmas
decorations.
market, did it have
Yeah,
a
like a
Christmas?
Christmas market. It was
Oh,
so
nice.
nice there. And it just was so different. But I feel like, and even you being there earlier, early or in the 90s and
Hmm.
then writing about it later, I feel like it was such an impactful place that you could probably have a lot to draw
Yeah.
from in your memory because it was so different.
Yeah.
So much different. They do not live, they work to live. They don't live to work like
Oh,
we do.
yeah.
Did you feel like it
Hmm.
was like that too whenever you
Yeah.
went?
Yeah, and I have a Swiss cousin that we stayed with in Switzerland, and yeah, I mean, really different kind of ideology than what we have. I mean, hard
Yes.
workers, but life isn't all about work. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Like there's time to do your grocery shopping and cook a meal, and where I feel like we're just rushing, 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 stopping by the grocery store on our way to somewhere else, and you know throwing some dinner together before soccer practice, and just all of that.
Absolutely. Yes. And that was like the
Mhm.
major thing. And I remember being and I was young. I was about 19 then. And I thought it was amazing though. I'm like, this is so wonderful that you like are so focused on family like this. Like all the stores closed down in the middle of the day, except for the
Mhm.
pubs. The pubs were open and they would go home and just be with their family. And then they go back and then open up and then close at whatever time, in the afternoon. And I just was like, "Oh my gosh, that's just amazing." It's
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it's and just similar to like with the Amish, just focusing on that family. But
Yeah.
I do feel like people nowadays are starting to really see the value in that kind of work-life balance now. I feel like it's talked about more, it's more recognized by businesses and things like that now,
Yeah.
which is good.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I am so excited to talk about this book. So let's talk about The Shop Down the Lane. Tell us about, obviously no spoilers, but tell us about this book. Okay. Tell us about of course, the hero and the heroine, and we love the love story, but I love to hear more about you've got mail vibes about it.
Okay. Yeah. So the shop down the lane was inspired by You've Got Mail, but there's kind of a longer history to that. So the shop down the lane was also inspired by Pride and Prejudice, which was
Oh,
published in 1813. And I think so many romances are inspired by Pride and Prejudice. Um, but there's kind of a whole list of stories that have come kind of one right after the other that led to You've Got Mail.
mm,
So Pride and Prejudice is mentioned in You've Got Mail a couple of different times, and Nora Ephron, said that was part of her inspiration. But there was a play in 1937, a Hungarian play called Parfumerie, and
mm,
it inspired the movie The Shop Around the Corner, and that came out in 1940, and it was the movie that came out right before the last movie Jimmy Stewart did before World War II. And,
ah,
he served in World War II, and that, it was pretty impactful for him. So it was interesting to watch The Shop Around the Corner and see him in it pre World War II. And then a musical came out in 1949 called In the Good Old Summertime, and it has Judy Garland in it, and it was inspired by The Shop Around the Corner. Then there was a Broadway play in the 60s called She Loves Me, and then You've Got Mail in 1998, which, Nora Ephron has said was inspired by The Shop Around the Corner. And so, I just played off all of that and came up, and I love to do this with stories, like how I did it with my Courtships of Lancaster County that were inspired by Shakespeare plays, to just kind of turn everything upside down and to take a story we're familiar with and go, wow, how can I plop this into an Amish setting with Amish characters? And these stories, besides Pride and Prejudice, all have an anonymous pen pal trope. So I have a circle letter that's centered around birding in the shop around, or the shop down the lane, and two characters, Moses and Lois, both joined the circle letter, but she uses her middle name Jane, and he uses Minnow because he's become Mennonite instead of joining the Amish church because they don't want anyone in the community to know who they are. Where in the before all this happens, Lois is working at a shop called Paradise Found, and Moses buys the shop. So they have a history together. So this is also a second chance romance. And but now they despise each other in real life. So they like just absolutely despise each other. And in the meantime, they're falling in love with each other, through these anonymous letters. So it was just so much fun to write. And, one of the most rewarding things was Moses's character arc. And in You've Got Mail, I think Joe Fox is kind of a jerk. And, they have a nice, sweet romance that comes around, but he still put her mom's bookshop out of business, no matter what. You can't get around that.
Right.
So, I just had a lot of fun with Moses's character and, the whole idea of Pride and Prejudice. And, the Amish are humble, humble people, and they really preach against pride. So all of that really fit in. We all are prejudiced. We all go with first impressions. We all have, these ideas of who we think someone is, and that's not who they are at all, but we just hold on to that. So both Moses and Lois have to deal with their pride and their prejudices, which really comes out. And the whole birding theme kind of becomes a voice of wisdom. We can learn so much from birds. And I don't know, birds just seem so close to God to me. They're just such beautiful, amazing creatures. And, there's just kind of this idea, you can learn so much from birds as far as your spiritual life, like get up early, whatever that means for you. But, organize your life so you have the most energy to do what you need to do. Sing, praise God, be protective of your flock, and really make sure everybody has what they need. And I just think birds are fascinating. So all of that was just a lot of fun to bring together. But one of the things that really surprised me, Lois has a best friend, Amy, and they've been really good friends since they were in elementary school, since they were in a one-room Amish, schoolhouse. And one thing that surprised me was their relationship and the love and care they have for each other. And it, just really dawned on me to, really have successful romantic relationships, we need a lot of support. And Lois is someone who doesn't have a lot of support except for Amy. And she has a brother who's worse than support. But just, how important it is, romance is wonderful. And I think romance makes the world go round. And the older I get, the more I absolutely know we need stories with happy endings. Life is hard. We need that. And no matter, I'm almost 63. I've been married 42 years. Every one of my heroes has part of my husband, in that hero. And my husband is very, very much my hero. But, love is the same if you're 21 or you're 62. I never would have thought at 21 that my heart could just still pitter patter for my husband after all these years. But all of us, I feel like all of us need stories with happy endings. So but we also need good solid friendships that help get us through life too. It's really the whole community that we need. So
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. I totally agree with you. And even just in the story itself, those characters are often really bring a lot of truth or give a lot of opportunity to help your character like evolve too. Right. Like to show them
definitely.
truth and their little epiphany moments or to bring humor, to bring a lot of different things that really kind of helps them. But yeah, you're totally right. It's much harder to recognize love in another person or love even in yourself if you haven't really experienced it in other relationships in your life. It's
Right.
very confusing and you're not sure, and and a lot of times it's different and if you've never experienced it, so you push it away, whereas whenever you have in great friendships, I feel like it's you're more receptive to it. You understand or have
Yeah.
at least set boundaries and have more respect for yourself and that person for that reason, because you kind of recognize it. But my goodness, this book sounds amazing. I did not know that all of those were intertwined, like these older movies and these older
Yeah.
stories. That is so fun. I think that is so, so neat. And one of the best parts about, I love that you did the pen pals, because I feel that's like one of my favorite parts about You've Got Mail and just that whole storyline in general, because it's so fun. But I love the enemies to lovers whenever they're actually falling in love
hmm
and they really like each other underneath, but nobody knows but us. They don't know
hmm
yet until a certain time, I'm sure,
Yeah.
Um,
hmm
yes, that is so fun. That is just so fun. It just
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
It was just a lot of fun to write. Some books. I mean, I have fun with all my books, but some of them, it just takes a while to figure out. And this book is one of those that just feels like it kind of wrote itself. So,
Oh,
hmm
absolutely. It definitely sounds super fun. And like there's so many like how you said you like to do a little bit of twists and turns. And then adding the Amish aspect to it would be very interesting to see how they do that. Because if they're a little bit different and then going through their own kind of story arcs, I can't, oh my gosh, it just sounds so fun. And I do not want to gloss over that you and your husband have been married. Did you say 42 years?
yeah, 42
That's
years.
amazing.
Hmm
That is absolutely amazing. And it is so funny. My husband and I have been married for 13 years and we've been together for 16 years.
Wow.
And I can totally agree with you that, yes, I still get butterflies and still get the fluttering and still, he's still like he's just my favorite person.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
just, it's so funny because whenever you look at yourself or you think, like when you're younger, you're like, how can I just love you more today than I did yesterday? And you just do. It just grows. And I'm so
hmm
happy for you guys.
Oh,
42
thank
years. That's
you.
absolutely amazing. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. You're a pro. This is why we need stories
Well,
from you.
yeah, but the thing is, we're never really pros at this.
Oh, I know.
You're
It's,
still figuring
yes, still
out
figuring it
things
out.
out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost at time, Leslie, but I did want to
Mm.
ask you, was there any particular Bible verse that you maybe tied to this specific book or the themes in this book? Or even that just kind of carried you through your writing journey?
Yeah. So Psalm 84:3, and
Mm,
it's the verse, even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young. A place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King, my God.
mm,
And in the story, Moses's mother has dementia,
mm,
and Lois knew her when Lois was younger, but befriends her again in the care home that she's at. And Moses's mom, Anna, recites this verse for Lois, which Lois, she's living above the shop where she works. Moses is going to kick her out. She needs to find a new home. Her parents have both passed away,
mm.
and she's in an Amish community. She has a best friend, but she still feels so alone. And that verse just really speaks to her. God hasn't forgotten her. She will find a home, a nest. God will provide what she needs. And it's a verse that has always just really meant a lot to me. And even though I've never wondered where my home was going to be or any of that, I think we all want safety. We all want security. We all want to belong. And here in this verse, that says that even the sparrow has found a home, and then a place near your altar, Lord Almighty. And all of us have a home near God's altar. And, like, what better place could we be? Just the imagery of that, and the hope of that, and just the confidence of that. I just feel like it's such an imaginative and powerful verse, and just really an image to hold on to. So,
Oh, yes, 100%. Oh, thank you for sharing that. And it goes so well, like you said, that you have some of the birding theme
mhm.
within the book too. It is so beautiful. It kind of goes hand in hand too. There's a verse that I always really resonated with me as well, very similar, where Jesus says, "Look at the birds of the air.
Mhm.
God, they neither sow nor reap, but your heavenly Father feeds them," which gives us so much assurance that like he is always with us. So I love
Mhm.
that you shared that. It's so beautiful and it's
Yeah.
so true. And you're absolutely right. We always do want to feel like we belong. And I did want to say too, I'm glad that you said that too about the birds, that they really are magnificent. And I will tell you, my husband and I all joke like, when did we all of a sudden get this big fascination with birds? Because out here, you see this like big, huge, like osprey or something that's like gliding across the
Oh.
wind, and you're like, oh
Oh,
my
that's
gosh,
beautiful.
it just is so majestic. And
Mhm.
some birds, like penguins and bald eagles, and certain other eagles, they mate for life. They are
Mhm.
together forever. And like you said, how they can teach us so many things, just by how they interact with one another, how they
Mm-hmm.
protect each other. Same thing. Ravens are extremely intelligent. They can use
Mm-hmm.
tools. They collaborate. There was a story I heard about ravens where they were working with a wolf pack to, like, they were guiding. I think they were like sharing food in some way. They were like,
Wow.
had like a synergy where the wolves would protect them or give them scraps if they would protect the wolves or something. I forget
Wow, that's
exactly the whole story.
incredible.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just amazing. So,
Mm-hmm.
just beautiful. And just, it is a beautiful picture with that verse so much because
Mm-hmm.
it's just so true.
Yeah. And
It's
there's
so
so
true.
much imagery in the Bible about birds. Like you said, that other verse, and there's so many
Oh,
more.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
Oh, just wonderful. Well, how can our listeners connect with you? Where is the best place that they can, well, get your book, The Shop Down the Lane, and then
mhm.
also connect with you and get on your email list?
Yeah. So visit my website, lesliegould.com. And you'll find all my social media there. You'll find a list of all of my books and where you can buy all of them. And of course, there are all the usual places: Amazon, Christian Book, Barnes and Noble, your favorite bookstore. If they don't have it, ask them to order it. And if you want to communicate with me, just hop on my website, send me an email, and I'll get back to you. I'd really love to hear from you. So.
Wonderful. And I will absolutely have all those links in the show notes. So go ahead, right, and scroll right down and you can click and get Leslie's book and connect with her. Absolutely go to her website. And just thank you so much, Leslie, for chatting with me today and sharing your heart and just sharing the beauty behind this book and this story and the history behind it. It's so interesting.
Mm.
I can't wait to read it. It sounds amazing. Thank you just
Oh.
so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. Yeah, this is just really delightful. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to hit subscribe and tap the bell to get notified of new episodes. We love blessing our listeners with exclusive interviews and, of course, amazing books. Each month, we host a themed book giveaway where you can win a selection of Christian romance novels and a few extra goodies, too. This month's theme is Royally in Love. We're giving away 5 swoon-worthy Christian romance books featuring crowns, courage, and Christ-centered love. From modern-day kingdoms to fantasy realms, these stories will sweep you off your feet in the best kind of fairy tale way. Whether you're listening as the episode drops or catching up later, no worries. You'll always find the link to the current giveaway on our website, christianromancepodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, keep your faith, share the love, and happy reading.